just when I thought it couldn't get any more crazy, it just did. Oh, what's that? Oh, Adrian Newey is to blame for why Yuki wasn't promoted until now? Oh, you got to be kidding me. Not more finger pointing that has nothing to do with the car. Stop talking, Helmet, for the love of Bernie Collins. I want to talk about other things, I really do, but your team just can't stop being controversial. This latest saga has opened Red Bull up to widespread criticism again. Not just from fans, but from drivers too. Guys like Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton, their takes say it all. Typical Red Bull. Heck, even Esteban Ocon's getting in on the act, going, well, I know exactly what it feels like to not be appreciated at a team, and I can certainly relate, bro. According to Yuki, Helmut's not even given him a phone call congratulating him on the matter. He's not even spoken to his new teammate of Verstappen. This is clearly finger-pointing and milking Yuki for all that he is worth. At this point, I make these videos because the team's PR machine is out here trying to rewrite the narrative, with shiny distractions like the admittedly gorgeous white RB21, and the heartwarming story surrounding the Japanese driver finally getting his big break. And yes, that's great. It's great to hear that drivers up and down the grid are supporting this move and wishing him well, including even the likes of Sergio Perez, him giving Yuki a call to provide him some valuable advice. And look, I'm not asking Yuki to win the World Championship or anything like this. I'm just frankly glad he's going to be getting a shot. Even if it doesn't work out, at least he had the opportunity to give it a go. But this latest claim that Helmut Marko is trying to peddle, not only is it incredibly pathetic considering the guy he is pointing his finger at, but also, it's just straight up wrong. Because Marko's now blaming Adrian Newey, saying the legendary designer was furious at Yuki after an incident that supposedly took place at last year's Mexican Grand Prix, just as the team were considering their options with Lawson. But here's the thing. Immediately, myself, the world at large, including Adrian Newey's own wife, called foul on that particular chestnut. That incident at last year's Mexican Grand Prix? Well, Yuki Gatsley? It never happened. Yuki didn't even make it to turn 1 in his altercation with Albon. It turns out that the crash he may be referring to happened 2 years ago, at the 2022 British Grand Prix. Simply put, Yuki sent it too hard into turn 3, Span tagged his own teammate, scattering debris that ultimately damaged Max's floor. And then he finished P7. I mean, okay, that wasn't a great look for Yuki, and people were right to be mad at him for that, but you're seriously telling me that made Newey block Yuki's career thereafter? And then in relation to last year, Adrian wasn't even present within the Red Bull camp, let alone the Formula 1 paddock, to even have a say in the matter. Because as Amanda Newey said, he was on gardening leave at the time, and then the late Eddie Jordan, his manager, confirmed that it started on the 6th of September, 6 weeks roughly before the Mexican Grand Prix. It's just all kinds of wrong. And besides, when you compare 2022 Yuki to the Yuki we saw at the end of last year, they were, as Helmut Marko once put it, a different Yuki. As you can probably tell, with very little effort, the story falls apart almost instantly, and it just is now, quite frankly, a new low. Because Newey's role was technical, not managerial. And even if he had been involved, Adrian's never been the type to hold grudges over driver politics. And that 2022 crash, it didn't cost Max the title. Checo still finished second, so it wasn't an overly bad result for Red Bull. Plus Newey, he barely touched the F1 side that year. He was more of an overseer to Pierre Vacher's team, being branded irreplaceable in that respect. Because as we all know now, he was working on the RB17 hypercar. That was his baby. He had reduced his responsibility with Red Bull Racing ever since 2014, when the rules and constant micromanagement from the FIA regarding innovation was getting him down. So he could go and work on the Valkyrie and the RB17 that were no holds barred. That kept him with Red Bull at all. Because 10 years ago, if that not had happened, he would have been out the door. And why would you even try and pin this sort of decision on Adrian? Is it because now he's at Aston Martin, he could be an apt scapegoat, try and downplay his achievements there, just like how Christian and Helmut have been downplaying Adrian's contributions and saying that his method of using paper over computers was antiquated and a nuisance? What a way to celebrate the guy that pretty much gave you cars that could then go on to win championships with. That is amazing. It just makes Zach Brown ultimately right to turn the screw against you. I do believe it is trying to downplay Adrian now he's at Papa Stroll's team, with potentially more influence than ever. And in regards to driver decisions, Newey did admit that he regretted not speaking up more about driver choices in the past. Note, in the past. Not because he would then look at a driver and says, "Oh, I don't like you just because, don't put him in the car." No, that doesn't sound like Adrian Newey at all, the man who is famously known for not wanting confrontations. And I can easily imagine putting a moratorium on a driver for a particular seat, that would cause confrontation. And it clearly struck a nerve if Amanda Newey felt compelled to step in, despite herself not wanting attention. Fair play, Amanda. Because Newey isn't a political animal. He never has been. He's one of the most respected engineers in F1 history because he stays out of paddock drama. And as one report from Automotor and Sport put it, via Crash.net, there is nothing he hates more than internal politics. Sure, he might decide to dabble in it a little bit over at Aston Martin because Paw Patrol has given him the remit and mandate in which to do so. And historically, Newey steered well clear of team boss power games. He's always said roles like Ross Brawn's over at Brawn GP, they just weren't for him. And that mindset goes all the way back to the 90s with Williams, because Adrian clashed with management over secretive decisions, like the move to ditch Nigel Mansell in favour potentially of Alain Prost. And as has become evidence over the years, Nigel and Alain, they did not get on at all. In fact, all of this was so frustrating that Adrian requested an amendment to his contract, so that means he would be involved in decisions including driver lineups. And no, this was not trying to be some sort of kingmaker and therefore justify what Helmut Marko said. It was there to prevent any sort of finagling that maybe would go against the potential of the team to win, or something that may destabilise the team and cause political tensions. He was there to try and be a mediator, not a blocker, because as he famously said, no more decisions made over lunch for me to hear about later. But it happened anyway. The politics continued, and honestly, that era still gets my hackles up. The team pushed away key players all the time in the 90s, who built its golden era. Does that sound familiar to you? History? Meet Red Bull. So understandably, it would make sense for Adrian Newey to maybe just keep a low profile and just focus on what he is best at, making really, really good cars so people could win in them with McLaren and Red Bull. Because trying to do anything more really didn't get anywhere at Williams, so what was even the point? And besides, it would probably be best for his own psyche to just focus on designing things in private in his own special office that he painted quail's egg blue to just really get under the skin of Ron Dennis because he wanted all things grey and monotone and boring. It never gets old, that story. It's so good. You should really read Adrian Newey's book, How to Build a Car. It's just fascinating and mildly amusing in that respect. But yes, Newey, internal team friction, corporate politics, they do not get along. It's the thing he likes least about F1. And indeed, recent reports about his departure from Red Bull cited an internal tug-of-war within the team that was not Newey's cup of tea. That he saw the writing on the wall going on between what was going on with Helmut Marko, Christian Horner, where was the team going to go, especially maybe down to the dissolution of the Porsche deal at the 11th hour. Maybe Adrian simply no longer wanted to be part of it. It was clear that the Red Bull that he signed up with in 2006, the fun, renegade team that was there to party, have a good time, whilst also strive to do well and forge its own legacy in the sport, no, it was gone. The party was over. All that remained were just a bunch of party poopers. So what I'm trying to get at here is what Helmut Marko is trying to say, it just doesn't line up to Adrian Newey's past within Formula One, where he tried to have some say to try and bring some stability, not instability with a driver lineup, but then got the cold shoulder, and thusly he stayed in his lane and continued to do so. Sure, he flirted with the idea of having some more control, but that was mainly related to the technical department rather than political stuff. Because this just makes the claim Marko's trying to say all the more striking and atypical and just, again, downright wrong and misleading. Marko then ties this to recent events, stating that now Newey had left Red Bull, the obstacle had been removed and Tsunoda's improved form could finally be rewarded. They could take all the credit for him being there. But why would Adrian even care or know about what Liam Lawson was capable of? Because back in 2022, when that actual incident took place between Pierre and Yuki, Lawson was in Formula 2, dude. I mean, why would Adrian even bother to bat an eyelid toward that guy? Conveniently, it shifts blame away from Marko and Horner, placing it on someone who's no longer around to respond. It's a calculated move, banking on Yuki's fans to redirect their frustration away from the team at the time when they really need that to happen quickly. So throughout all of the turmoil, throughout all of the chaos, all of the accusations of being seen as ruthless and more brutal than ever, no. By Marko going, Yuki fans, it was Adrian's fault. No, this is trying to put a logical spin on proceedings and just saying, well, Newey's no longer here, so the door's open for us to welcome Yuki with open arms and reward his newfound attitude and go-get-him spirit that has started the season off with Racing Bulls extremely well. He has really come on leaps and bounds. We are so proud of him. Pay no mind to all the stuff we said about in the past about him being angry and inconsistent and irregular. Yeah, good luck, Helmet. People remember. And I think people are no longer willing to toe the line with these PR stunts that Red Bull is trying to pull over our eyes. Because them doing all of this avoids just simply admitting that Red Bull may have misjudged things in the first place, playing silly buggers with Liam Lawson's management, and most likely irritating Max Verstappen in the process. Something that the team is trying to avoid. If what he has said was true, and Adrian Newey used his influence to impede Tsunoda succeeding the outgoing Checo, one would expect this chestnut to no longer matter, right? Newey would have left. Because if you claim that you were free to promote Yuki, you still chose to go with Lawson anyway. That alone suggests deeper reasoning. Marko himself admitted that Tsunoda had a reputation for inconsistency, meaning the hesitation likely stemmed from Yuki's own track record, not Newey's opinion. It appears Marko is using Newey's alleged fury that one time to effectively say, hey, our car designer doesn't trust Yuki anymore. It means in his own mind he doesn't have to be accountable for the mess that he found himself in because he is meant to be in charge of where junior talent and prospective talent for the senior team go. You are accountable for this, as well as Horner, but at least Christian's trying to put a slick spin on it. Seriously, the disconnect between Christian and Helmet, it's just baffling at this point. It's just, Christian, put a stop to this. Red Bull head office, put a stop to this, somebody! And unfortunately, this whole situation, this whole charade, it will remind everyone that no, Marko was deeply involved in the decision process. So much so that even Newey's opinion mattered to him, while simultaneously distancing himself from the unpopular initial choice to overlook Yuki. For Horner, such a narrative might be less than ideal. In fact, it isn't ideal at all. It exposes internal discussions that would normally remain private. But at this point, it would be impractical to try and call Helmet out on it, because at this point, Red Bull needs to establish a united front for the sake of trying to keep Max Verstappen happy. Because as Helmut Marko has said, he knows that Max is not very happy at the moment. And why should he be? And when you stop to think past Helmut Marko, past Max Verstappen, and past Christian Horner, what kind of effect will this have on Yuki Tsunoda himself, as well as the now demoted Liam Lawson? Because without knowing this movement has seriously changed the trajectories of their respective careers. Liam Lawson thought that he was going to be the heir apparent to Max Verstappen should he move on to another team, and therefore he would take reign. But no, that plum's been taken away by Yuki Tsunoda. So Yuki Tsunoda was destined to be the bridesmaid, as Christian Horner would say far too many times that is comfortable. But no, he gets to be the bride now, all dressed in a white RB21. Now, at this point, we all know what Yuki's about to embark on, so I'd rather focus on the ramifications for Liam now that the dust has settled on his first two races. A sudden demotion like this, it could wreck a young driver's confidence for sure. One moment you're trusted, the next you're sidelined. Red Bull framed it as protection, a duty of care, and then Horner went on a tangent to then say, well, the engineers said to me that they had concerns over Lawson's overall psyche and demeanour, and that it could then cause an absolute meltdown, which would affect the team overall, their morale, even more so than it had done in the first two races. Okay, is that kind of passing the buck onto the engineers voicing their concerns? Because again, as you said in the very first episode of Drive to Survive, matey, the buck effectively stops with you. But to give them credit where it's due, at least they took action now. But they did listen to the concerns of the engineers, and they probably saw what was coming with the likes of Pierre Gasly in 2019, and so it's best to put the fire out before it spreads and becomes a blazing inferno. Liam at least has a chance. It may not be a big chance. He may be destined forever to be the yardstick over at the second team for other prospective future talent that may then get a chance at the senior team. But hey, At least he still gets to be in F1 as many other drivers, including Jack Doohan, whose own future is under much doubt. Because yeah, that is something to remember. Jack Doohan's own future is not safe at the moment. And yeah, Liam Lawson is very fortunate to have a second chance. In the end, Lawson may look like collateral damage throughout all of this, picked when Yuki's position was uncertain, then dropped when the tide turned. The risk? Well, this episode becomes part of his brand, even though the spotlight now shines brighter on Yuki. He'll want to avoid the perception that he was just a pawn in Red Bull's internal politics game, that he was being punished in the wake of his management team overplaying their hand regarding him, bigging him up too much. You know, to the point where if he wasn't in a Red Bull car for 2025, they could easily walk and offer Liam services to another team, and then people starting to point out, well, what was the point of his own testing program in the simulator when they didn't just do a simple, intense TPC program with old previous cars, like what they did over at Mercedes with Kimi Antonelli? That is a very good point. Why didn't they prepare him like that in an RB19? But right now, maintaining confidence after such a public trial must be tough for Lawson. But the support Horner has voiced does suggest the team is somewhat remorseful for what transpired at the senior team. But it is equally up to Liam to reset his public image. Keep his head down, score some points for Racing Bulls, and maybe not be so bombastic with your quotes, and try and win some fans back to your cause. You know, the whole "I'm not here to make friends" quote, I think that is going to stick with him for a very long time. And yes, sure, you may not be here to make friends, but I think equally importantly, you are not here to make enemies. So how does this reflect on Max Verstappen and his trust in the team's leadership? Max is the linchpin of Red Bull's success, make no bones about it. Max has chosen to focus his ire, his frustration and his anger on fixing the car. Because you got to admit, the attitude that Max has been carrying, even though the RB21 is not fit for purpose for being the lead car in 2025, he's been bizarrely chill, calm, reflective almost. Like, he's just accepted it. It is what it is, there's no point getting angry about it, and he probably doesn't want to give any ammunition to his detractors, saying that he is wild, he's not learned a thing since 2018. No, he's not giving people any of that. Because Verstappen also values the human aspect of this all. The Lawson incident revealed a glimpse of Max's feelings, because according to Helmet, we know Max is not happy about how it went down. Max even took the subtle step of liking an Instagram post by former F1 driver Guido van der Garde that criticised Red Bull's treatment of Lawson and likened it to bullying. And now in the Dutch press, he said that that action spoke volumes, Max. And then don't get me started about the quip that he made at the recent Honda Red Bull media event, saying goodbye for now to working with Honda. Now, okay, spanner of speculation time. Sure, this might mean that Honda might work on an effort in a different racing category, perhaps, maybe a hypercar effort in WEC, perhaps? Or maybe he's really trying to turn the screw and saying, hey, I have a lot of Aston Martins in my car collection. The Valkyrie was really nice, and Adrian's over there, and Fernando could be my teammate for at least a year. I mean, just saying. Goodbye for now. He may have been trying to be polite, but what was wrong with a simple goodbye? And for someone usually apolitical, Verstappen's signals stand out. He clearly empathised with Lawson and disapproved of how it was handled. Whilst he won't defy the team, it's obvious he pays attention to how his teammates are treated. He is all too aware of it. And when it comes to the trust in leadership, Max's loyalty has been strongly tied to individuals. Adrian Newey, he views as part of his second family. They probably agreed on a lot of things, including a mutual disgust and disinclination for getting involved in intra-team politics. But what makes this all the more intriguing, awkward, and complicated is that historically, Max Verstappen has said that if Helmut Marko were to no longer be involved with Red Bull Racing, the guy who helped orchestrate him get in the Red Bull camp in the first place, then he would maybe reconsider his options and go elsewhere. He'd be free to leave. That goes to show that there is an implicit trust in Marko's guidance, so for Helmut to come out with such things as this, that detracts from the overall problem of the car, and then blames an issue on somebody else who no longer works for the team, I can imagine that went down like a lead balloon in Max's social media feed. I can't imagine that Max would be impressed by this routing of responsibility to a person that Max views so fondly as well. People jokingly say he might have his number on speed dial. If Max felt Marko's comments were disrespectful to him or not entirely truthful, he might address it internally or simply, bank it, take note of it. The only clue that we have as to what the Dutchman's feelings are right now regarding the team and the car's development is that he said, I have made my feelings clear. As in, I've laid them out, It's the team's job to make of it what they will. The team now knows what is expected of them, including Helmut Marko. And him doing this with Adrian? No, surely that's not a way of trying to make things clear. But for now, Verstappen seems to be navigating these waters by focusing on driving. He's expressed that Tsunoda's arrival doesn't change the team's goal and that he hopes Yuki will perform well because they do get along. But if internal politics were to escalate, say, if Horner and Marko's rift grew over the season, or if Helmut continued making divisive comments that would detract from the mission of going racing, Verstappen could be in a really awkward position, because we did see rumblings of that last year where Max did not want to get involved at all, and his father Jos was saying it was a powder keg waiting to explode, and this may be burbling along in the background still this year, because Helmut Marko, he's been on an absolute rampage day after day. He's made some kind of quip that either is not something Christian Horner wants to hear, because this could easily break Max's trust in Helmut Marko. Marko may no longer have any sway in Max's overall judgment, because remember, Max is now a four-time world champion. He has more power than he thinks he does. He is bigger than Helmut Marko now. Surely he could trust in his own personal beliefs. And his own personal beliefs right now, well, in terms of Red Bull, they absolutely stink. So yes, this whole Yuki-Adrian saga is just throwing yet another complication in regards to Red Bull team politics. Because on the surface, you'd be thinking that Helmut Marko providing a somewhat logical, rational explanation on paper if you really don't look into it, and recency bias is a forethought, then you'd be thinking, oh, well, that explains everything. Oh, Adrian Newey, bad, boo! Hoping that the team would be forgiven and start liking them again. Well, quite frankly, I think this has made the situation even worse. Because it's easier to blame the guy who left than to admit that the current management made an oopsie, especially since Marko got the whole incident mixed up. But that being said, for Yuki, the public blaming of Newey for his slow promotion might be something of a backhanded compliment. It frames his earlier struggles as something that could be overcome. But given the overly complicated situation, and Horner trying to downplay certain things and Helmut Marko coming up with these ridiculous statements, it's hard to believe anything Red Bull say at this point. But now that Yuki Tsunoda is in the seat, he might have the chance to maybe put whatever the management has been saying out to the media in a moot position. Red Bull must tread carefully now. Newey may be gone, but he's far from irrelevant. Now a rival weapon, with full freedom and a Fernando. This kind of scapegoating could be fuel to Papa Stroll's fire, because I could easily imagine that Papa Stroll may come out one day saying, "The allegations against my friend and partner in the team, Adrian Newey, are absolutely absurd and atrocious and wrong." And also, internally, it really does risk alienating all of the Red Bull technical department. Who next will be on the chopping block to be seen as a scapegoat for the management's failings? I mean, to be fair, if they did decide to scapegoat Pierre Vacher, it would be somewhat valid. That there is a kernel of truth to that, because he was just simply too stubborn to admit that they went down the wrong path, but they were committed to it, and they probably didn't know any other option. And as for the court of public opinion, Red Bull would be wise to put this narrative to rest, move on, rather than dragging this out day after day after day. The best way to do that is through getting results, keeping their mouths shut aside from what goes on the track. If Yuki flourishes and the team operates smoothly, that will help accelerate this transformation for the better. And it may mean that Marko's comments, if he decides to keep his mouth shut a little more often, at the beginning of 2025, it'll become a footnote. But ultimately, this entire story just goes to show that Formula One, it may be a fantastic racing series, but like with many other sports, politics is the watchword. Blame-shifting narratives might win the argument in the moment, but teamwork and accountability win championships. As Red Bull has to figure out what to do in their post-Newey era, communication, fairness, keeping internal disagreements private, yeah, that's the mission. They have to have a unified message. You can no longer have Helmut Marko going to Kleine Zeitung or OE24 in Austria and just speaking his mind, whereas Christian Horner is telling the rest of the media, "Oh no, everything's fine. Oh, we feel bad for Liam and Yuki. Yeah, he has his fair moments of hardships, but he's really deserved the opportunity to give it a go." Oh, what Helmut said? Oh, Helmut! The Marko Newey saga has given us a rare peek behind Red Bull's curtain. How they close that curtain and refocus will determine if this is just a minor blip or the start of even larger tremors than what we saw with 2024 and Hornergate. But it could help with the departed Checo Perez in his efforts to stage a return to F1. The fallout from Liam Lawson's shuffling around, it's left a mark on the man responsible for selecting Cadillac's opening lineup next year. To find out why, in the eyes of Mario Andretti, Liam Lawson's situation makes Checo very, very good looking, watch this video next, straight after this one.